Ladies and gentlemen, Roster Watch Nation, welcome back to the epic Roster Watch podcast brought to you by RosterWatch.com. My name is Alex Dunlap, joined by Trashman and Cody Carpentier here for a big episode of the podcast. Thanks to everybody for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Please remember to like the show, subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube, and give us a good rating and a review over there in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Just getting it done right off the top. Boys, Cody, Charleston, South Carolina, Trashman, back in Texas. Correct? You're back in Texas, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Internet's still a tiny bit spotty though, even though you're back home. Hopefully it'll hold up through the show. Didn't have any issues.
Well, my computer's been overheating.
Yeah, well, it's easy to overheat down here right now. We're talking about the riskiest wide receivers to draft in 2024 fantasy football leagues. I think it goes. I didn't really coordinate this with Cody, who came up with the title, but it is kind of in keeping with some of the tools that are going up at RosterWatch.com right now with the scoring distribution tools for standard and PPR redraft leagues. We're starting to get more and more of these redraft tools up. We're getting more and more questions about when the Ultimate Draft cheat sheet products are going to be available up on the site. I can just tell you, Cody and I have been now through 24 separate iterations with hundreds of tests on each one for the PPR sheet. And it's going to go to, I think today it's going to go to 25. It's going to go to, we're going to get it to where it's feeling right. There are a couple spots that still feel a little bit buggy and a couple interesting places that we're going to have to navigate. Some of them have to do with, the boom bust nature of some of these wide receivers and where they're going in these drafts, what we might be able to do to mitigate those risks and maybe pivot positionally. But with that being said, a lot of these tools we're putting up right now are the tools that are going to be a lot of the inputs that go into the Ultimate Draft cheat sheet. And of course, the scoring distribution tool, the Busts and Monsters tool is one of those that I'll be referencing today. But yeah, this is riskiest wide receivers. This is for redraft. Clearly in best ball, you're a lot more willing to take on the risk of these dudes having their big kind of smashing, boom weeks, right? But in season long, we do like consistency. So with that being said, Cody, do you want to get started?
Yeah, I'll start it off, and I'm going to talk. This is going to be a guy that we've talked about. It feels like on a handful of pods the last couple of weeks, and it's just directly correlated to his ADP, which right now is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Is wide receiver 11 on FFPC. It's also been wide receiver 10 on Underdog in the last couple of weeks. Drake London. As far as boom bust goes and risk and having faith and trust in a player, I'm worried about the Drake London thing, and I think everybody should be, right? We've seen what can happen last year. We saw a couple games where he had 172 yards, 125 yards. We saw it twice. And now he gets the quarterback upgrade that everyone is just vaulting him right into what is damn near, about as close as you can get without seeing it to Justin Jefferson tier, right? Jefferson right now is going off the board about wide receiver 5, 6. Jefferson was wide receiver 1 last year, had Kirk Cousins. Now all of a sudden you put Kirk Cousins in Atlanta, and the expectation now for London spikes all the way up. And one could say, with a good season, London could be right up into that conversation with Jefferson, which I don't think it's going to happen. I'm nervous about what's going to happen on the field when week 1, 2, 3, 4 comes around with the weaponry that's there. I think it's a risk to draft Drake London in the second round. I think even, the early part of the third round, I think is a risk. I think I'd feel much better about it if we're talking 4th, 5th round for Drake London, and maybe people think, well, that's cockamamie. But I think if we're being honest with ourselves, the weaponry that is in Atlanta, as we've talked about with Bijan, Kyle Pitts, and everyone forgets about Darnell Mooney and Rondell Moore. But I think there's an adequate weaponry, as well as Kirk Cousins still coming off that Achilles injury. I don't think everything's just going to roll smoothly out the gate in Atlanta.
Yeah, I just sent you a chat, Cody. But hey, so I do think the same about Drake London. And here's the other thing about him. He is never. This is all projection. right? This is all projection with Kirk Cousins. And whenever we look, I couldn't believe that he's never had a 25-point game in PPR. He's never had a 20-point game in standard. And so when you think it to yourself, it's like, okay, we're baking this in that Kirk Cousins is going to change everything, right? He's going to change everything with the offense. Are you talking? All right, so are we talking about Drake London's upside? Or are we talking about Drake London's downside? Because his on the downside over the course of the last 2 seasons, he's ruined your week. He has ruined your week. 57% of the he's gotten less than 7 fantasy points in standard leagues. It's just miserable, right? Like even in standard, you want these guys getting 7 points, right? Anything less than that's a total bust. Kind of like in PPR, your wide receivers getting anything less than double digits, total bust, right? So in standard, it's been 57.58% of the time over the last 2 years he's busted for you, which is just terrible. I mean, consider the fact that Tyreek Hill busts for you 14% of the time, right? That CeeDee Lamb does it 18% of the time. Amon-Ra St. Brown, that seems just very trustworthy, right? 17% of the time. We're talking about 3x, all that, and we're talking about the fact that he's never had a big, he's never had a monster game. Of course, he's risky.
Yeah.
You're baking it. This is all projection, right? This is all projection with him. I'll go to the next one because I don't want Trashman to steal it, although he's probably not going to steal this one considering it's one of his most golden sons and most precious little sweet, sweet, sweet babies. And I love him too because he's from Lake Travis. But it's Garrett Wilson, man. Garrett Wilson's risky. He's risky. He's risky to take this year, especially when you look at him, man. He's going off the board. You're going to have to take him at wide receiver 8 overall, right there at the 1-2 turn. It's like Christian McCaffrey, of course, is going to go off the board. Bijan Robinson is going off the board. Breece Hall is going off the board. Around the time that like Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, all those guys, like, I think I'm hard pressed to, positionally there to say I have to take Garrett Wilson as a receiver before I take that group of running backs. And then when you consider him up against the guys like the Marvin Harrison Juniors of the world, Puka Nacua, Trashman and I had the Puka Nacua kind of, thing last week with Puka Nacua versus Garrett Wilson. Here's just what I have to say with it. And I understand that when you do look at Garrett Wilson, he actually has a really good season-long prop for next year, right? I mean, it's strong. His prop, if we were to just aggregate it over the course of a whole season, whatever the sports books are saying, they're basically saying somewhere between the lowest he's projected by any sports books at 1075.5 receiving yards. The highest is at 1200.5. That's on DraftKings and Underdog. FanDuel has him at 1075.5. But between DraftKings, Underdog, Prize Picks, and FanDuel, the average is at 1150.5, 7.5 touchdowns. So over the course of the season, a 17-game season, that's 14.47 points per week, which would project him as wide receiver 8, where he's going ADP-wise. But then I just look at some of the other tools, and I just can't get over this stuff about the Jets. So we look at the Jets. The Jets have one dome game next season at Arizona. They have a super late bye week that's like right in week 12, right? And they have an international game as well. As far as game environments, there's no worse game environment set up here than the New York Jets. I will say one good thing about him as far as the strength of schedule would be that they have they have a pretty good average team implied team total at 23.72. It's not top 10, but it is top 13, which was really surprising to me. But dude, here's the biggest part. That's baking into this that Aaron Rodgers is going to stay healthy.
Bingo.
And it's just, I mean, it's like you're not only, it's like it's enough for a wide receiver to get through a season, right? It's enough for a running back to make it through a season. Now we're talking about you not only have that. It was like we talked about with like Cooper Kupp and stuff last year, right? It was a little bit dangerous with the ADP because Matt Stafford, Dr. David Chow came on the podcast and told us if he gets one bruise to some weird part of his back or his neck, he's going to be done playing football for the rest of his life. So you're not only, this isn't a bet on one guy staying clean. This is a bet on two dudes staying 100% clean. Whenever I look at the Bust and Monsters tool as well, he's the only guy going in the top 8 ADP that just his bust percentage has been miserable. And I understand it's because he's had bad quarterback play, but he busts for you in standard over half the time. Over half the time in standard that Gary Wilson's been in the league, he's gotten you less than 7 points in a fantasy football game. Now his averages are going to look better because he has bigger boom games, right? But if we're just looking at this distribution tool just as a model of where central tendency would point us towards, like on a game per game basis, he is busty, dude. And even there's nobody until you get down to Drake London in the top 12 wide receivers, and then after that, dude. All right, so all CeeDee Lamb busts in PPR 10% of the time. Tyreek busts 6% of the time. Jamar is bust over the last 2 seasons. Jamar 23% of the time. Justin Jefferson 21. Amon-Ra 12. Puka Nacua 22. AJ Brown 21.62. Then all of a sudden, Garrett Wilson 41.18. You got to get down. You got to go down behind like guys like Devontae Adams, Chris Olave. Now we do have Drake London there. That's another dude that's seeming real busty. But you got to get
Amari Cooper.
Nico Collins, Brandon Aiyuk, like Deebo Samuel, DJ Moore, Mike Evans, Michael Pittman, Jalen Waddle, Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, all these guys to get to somebody even close. Yes, Amari Cooper at wide receiver 25.
Think about what the grand thought of Amari Cooper is, right? Everybody knows Amari Cooper because he can have these massive games, and then he can give you duds. And it's like he's right in there, 41% for Garrett Wilson.
He's going at the 1-2 turn. Amari Cooper's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
They're talking to Andrew Berry today, talking about how they need to get Amari Cooper done. Like, good luck getting that thing done when you have all this idiotic money put up in Deshaun Watson. He said Amari Cooper's great for their locker room. Hey, did you guys? I was listening to NFL radio. This is another thing that I heard. Have you guys heard about the guidance that the AP gave out for comeback player of the year in this upcoming year? Because Cody, you and I talk about this. We don't vote in, like, we're not AP voters, but we're PFWA voters. And for the comeback player of the year, I'm always like, well, what does that mean? You know, I'm like, how does Flacco
come back from sucking?
Right. Like, you come back from being bad, like Geno and stuff like that.
That should be a most improved award. That's what that should be.
What they've made it now is they've explicitly given out the guidance that now for the comeback player of the year, it has to be somebody coming back from injury.
There you go.
And so they were saying on or illness,
physical or emotional.
Well, I think that probably in today's society, you could probably come back from some sort of mental health incident or something. But the thing is too, they were saying on there that Aaron Rodgers is by far the runaway favorite for this. And I just started thinking to myself, how is Anthony Richardson not a favorite if it's just medical?
Yeah,
I'd like to look and see
what
I didn't have time to look and see what the markets were for him, but I'm going to look into that. I think Anthony Richardson would be an awesome bet if he's at some kind of really, really long odds there. Trashman, what do you think? Who's if maybe a little bit risky? Who's one of your risky wide receivers in 2024?
I was gonna say Justin Jefferson just because where you'd have to draft him to get him, and because of the quarterback situation there. But I ultimately went with somebody adjacent to him, and that's Addison. Somebody who you're drafting is potentially a high-end wide receiver too. And, I think they're going to stress getting the ball to Jefferson in that offense, but everything after that, I mean, it's kind of up in the air. I think I don't know. I'm not expecting Addison to have the season that he had last year.
You have to be really drafting in an odd way to be thinking about Jordan Addison. He's not a high-end wide receiver too. Right, his ADP right now is at the bare end of wide receiver 3. So, I mean, I mean,
he has that upside.
Well, you're drafting him to potentially be a high end, upside wide receiver 2 for you. I do understand that. And Addison's been when you look at some of these scoring distribution tools, he's been a little bit better than you would think. I wouldn't. I don't have his season long prop memorized, but it's not. It's not.
I mean, this is a player we were considering, could potentially be the offensive rookie of the year last season.
Well, no.
I distinctly remember having that conversation with you.
Preseason?
Yeah.
Oh, preseason. Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, once the season comes along and Puka does what he does, it's like there's not a, what I mean.
Well, I'm just saying, but he was in that conversation. Yeah. And I think, considering the quarterback situation, I think he's a far cry from from that kind of speed.
I can't believe Addison's only been in the league for 1 year. It's crazy how these years blend together, man. It's wild. Okay, Cody, who's your next one?
Wide receiver 17 over to FFPC. He's going off the board 30th right now. Plays receiver for the quarterback you just talked about a minute ago, who I just found the odds is 4th in comeback player of the year odds. That's Anthony Richardson at plus 600 behind Kirk Cousins, Joe Burrow, and Aaron Rodgers, who's at plus 25. But my player,
hold on. So Aaron Rodgers isn't the odds-on favorite? They were saying that on NFL. What are his odds again?
Plus 125 at DraftKings.
That's a risky bet.
Like plus 700. You can get Anthony Richardson at plus 700 at BetMGM, plus 600 at DraftKings and Bet365.
No, do you have BetMGM in South Carolina, Cody?
I only have Prize Picks in South Carolina, unfortunately. Okay. I literally don't have. I don't have squat diddly.
I was going to do a quick little Venmo to you. have you put that one in for me? Okay.
But the interesting thing, I won't get too far off of this, but the interesting thing, just because we're talking about it, is Russell Wilson, who in your conversation shouldn't be on this list. He's next after Anthony Richardson at plus 1,200. He shouldn't be on this list because he played last year, right? He didn't get hurt. He just sucked, right? Like he actually was good down the stretch.
I do think he was kind of playing with a thumb that hadn't quite gotten back to normal.
But he played.
Dude, the AP was given this guidance. They're not gonna these slovenly fat journos at the combine you see every year with the nacho cheese dribbling. I can't believe these people don't care to the way that they look to present themselves at these media events. But like they're always just sitting back and just saying like, what's it supposed to mean? Comeback player. They're getting these big arguments about it. Now that the guidance has been given, they're gonna go by what they've been told. It's not gonna be somebody like that. They just don't want it to be another Flacco.
Yes, bingo. All right. So riskiest wide receivers back to Indianapolis, where the quarterback was Anthony Richardson. The receiver I'm talking about is Michael Pittman here. Michael Pittman, who added another receiver this offseason. The last 2 drafts, he's added Alec Pierce in round 2. Josh Downs. Now he gets Adonai Mitchell. All we hear coming out of that building is the love for these damn tight ends, Jelani Woods and Kylan Granson, all these guys right around training camp time. Of course, they have Jonathan Taylor out of that backfield. And then you bring the crown jewel, Anthony Richardson, who is a rushing phenom and has the ability to take fantasy football to the next level as a quarterback. But a lot of that coming from the rushing perspective. There's a lot of weaponry here, and I'm not sure that Richardson is ready to kind of get that ball to everybody. Pittman just got paid. And when you look at the monsters and busts chart that you have just talked about in standard scoring, 0%, 0 times he has scored over 20 fantasy points, 9% over PPR in 25 points. So Pittman, I'm scared of, not scared. I'm worried about where he's going right now as a top 20 wide receiver, just with, the conversation we had earlier, Alex, coming off of a different show is Adonai Mitchell, we're going to be looking a year from now, is Adonai Mitchell going to be the one that is looked at as the alpha in this offense? He could be. From everything we've seen in college, like these guys aren't that far apart from college scouting perspective. So 2 really good receivers, 1 quarterback that it's the same conversation similar to what we really had with Lamar Jackson. Who's the third one?
Downs.
Okay, good.
I mean, Reggie Wayne thinks he's Reggie Wayne.
I was hoping you were going to go Alec Pierce on me.
Oh, okay.
No. If you had been with us at that Senior Bowl, you'd know Alec Pierce would be nowhere in that conversation.
I think Cody was at that Senior Bowl. He was the one who saw him going home early.
Yeah, he was. I went to the airport when he was there.
Yeah, for sure. Oh man, I got my. How do I turn this thing off on my phone, Cody? Jeez, dude.
Second show today. This thing's going off during the show.
It comes through my computer speakers. Okay, so hopefully we don't get flagged for anything there from the iPhone sounder. Hey, speaking of that podcast, I was supposed to do earlier today, and I'm gonna have to reschedule it with Theo. But he did have an interesting question that I want to ask you guys at the end of this one, and I want you to be able to think about it. So here's the question, and I'm gonna ask you when the show's over. Okay, who's one player, and for fantasy, if you could choose one player who you could know what their end of season stats were, who would you pick? Okay,
he had okay.
All right, but we can just. But all right, so I'm going to get back to this next one, but I think that would be an interesting thing to end on. My next guy here, risky, and look, risky doesn't mean we're not going to take him. I plan on having some Drake London. I probably plan on having some Garrett Wilson. You know, like I'm not opposed to these guys. And look, there are guys with their profile. Like we looked at this Busted Monster School and we're like, dude, Chris Olave's never really had a super huge game either. He's had really consistent games. He doesn't bust often, but it's just like they're nits you can pick with a whole lot of these guys. And one of them a guy who I love, but man, I can't get over the fact that we're gonna have a little bit of a nit to pick here is George Pickens. He busts way too much, dude. Almost 60% of the time he's going to bust for you in PPR and in standard. And I know it's been bad quarterbacks and I know yada, yada, yada. And I know that Deontay Johnson's gone now, but they did bring in Roman Wilson. And who's to say that Russell Wilson doesn't still stink? Arthur Smith ruins people. We're really going to, you know what I mean? We're really going to
Didn't he fix Ryan Tannehill?
Okay. Recently. And what have we gotten?
I'm going to say that's more similar. Fixing Ryan Tannehill is a lot more similar than wrecking Desmond Ridder to Russell Wilson.
But he wrecks he brings in Jonnu Smith and he does this Cordero Patterson stuff. It's weird, man. It's cockamamie. He's got his bizarre
Mike Tomlin today did say essentially that he wasn't going to deal with any goal line fugazi from Arthur Smith. That somebody asked him a question about the packages that Arthur Smith was using last year. And Mike Tomlin kind of like
just miserable. I'd forgotten about all that stuff, Cody. I forgot, dude. Oh man, McCool, Pruitt. Make sure you got to get the ball. Make sure you get the ball in this dude's hands. Okay, so yeah, Pickens. I worry a little bit about Pickens. Trashman, let's get your last risky guy, and then I want to hear y'all's answer
Maybe
about the
one
guy.
Maybe slight worry about Pickens, but not really for me. Guy I worry about right now is Brandon Aiyuk. I think this will obviously change as the season gets closer because he will or will not either be a 49. We'll have some idea.
What's he going to do? Sit out the season?
Huh?
What's he going to do? Sit out the season?
He could sit out into the season. I'm not sure. There's a lot of variables here. I just feel like Aiyuk, somebody who you're depending on to be, a weekly receiver starting week one. We're just not sure about that. He says the 49ers don't want him. That offense too, where it's just we're depending a lot on Christian McCaffrey. We got Deebo Samuel, who's wide receiver / running back. I just feel like Aiyuk is considering where you have to take him to get him. He's not somebody that I really feel good about taking a stab at right now. To me,
man, I don't feel good about taking Aiyuk either, Trashman. But it's not because he's going to play. He's owed what, $14.1 million? Take your 14 point, dude. They might pay him and then franchise him again, or they might pay him and franchise him. They might keep him for another season. They're saying that he wants $27 million. Cody, is Aiyuk worth $27 million?
In the new age of payments, yes. Because that's the new second. That's like the new second / third tier. The new top tier is 35. New age
post Justin Jefferson only.
Well,
I don't think
Jefferson. AJ Brown's at 30, right?
Well, right. But
so Chase is going to get 35. Lamb's going to get 35. Jefferson's got 35. The new second tier, third tier is 27. And you don't think
if Aiyuk was on the Lions instead of Amon-Ra St. Brown, he'd be doing the same thing?
No, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is a one of one. I think that's just an ultimate hit. We loved Amon-Ra. And we didn't even think he could be this good.
I do think that he doesn't get the credit he's due. I do think you can kind of tie it to a T. Higgins type of situation. Everyone thinks if T. Higgins was by himself, T. Higgins would tear the league apart. I don't think that much, but I do think Aiyuk and T. Higgins are got equal parts, I guess.
All right. So, yeah, I feel weird about Aiyuk, but I think that he's going to have to show up. The team has all the leverage.
Send him to New England or Vegas. Maybe the Chargers. The Chargers would be interesting.
That's it. I just don't know. What would the situation be where Aiyuk goes there and you're like, oh gosh, Yahtzee, this is it. Like his value is going to go up from here.
New England.
Oh,
I think he goes in. He's better than those. I know it nukes our rookies and stuff, but giving Drake May a quarterback, a established receiver.
No, but that's terrible for fantasy. Like that's terrible for the way that we feel about him in fantasy.
Going to the Chargers, I think would be good. I think it's not going to happen, but if he hypothetically went to the Chargers and he walks past Quentin Johnson in that room, and all of a sudden it's like, what? Who's really competing with Brandon Aiyuk with the Chargers? Nobody.
Maybe the Jaguars.
Oh hell, dude, there's too much there. Kirk, Davis, Thomas,
too much mid-level competition though. Too much mid-level competition.
They don't have a star unless Brian Thomas turns out super good.
Trade him to San Francisco for Evans.
Oh well,
or trade him to Tampa for Evans. Sorry, Tampa.
But they don't want to pay. They don't. Well, maybe they'd pay that for Evans. They don't want to pick up that contract that Evans just got. I guess it's just a 2-year deal. Regardless, all right. So one player whose stats for fantasy for strategic purposes that you would like to know. I'm stealing this question from Theo Grimminger, who was going to ask me today.
I've won on his show a couple times, and I've given him this answer already. So I'm just going to tell it to you guys. Malik Nabers for me. If I could know if Malik Nabers is an 800-yard receiver or a 1,300-yard receiver or somewhere in between, I think that would help us. You could either get some value or you could stay away in all these drafts because he's a rookie that has that ability. He has that ability to come in and do what Chase has done, do what Jefferson's done, do what all these guys have done as rookies, Puka Nacua. And he also, in that offense, could get screwed. So I'd love to know if he's going to go boom or if he's going to go gloom.
I think the best answer for this, if I had kind of more time to think about it, would be one wherever you get information not only about that player, but also information about what it might mean for another player, right? What it might mean for another player. It's like as if I was going to say.
That's the case, then for me, it's Zeke Elliott. I just getting a handle on that Cowboys backfield. I think that would be most interesting to me,
because then you would know,
and other obvious reasons.
Because if you find out that Zeke ends up going for 420 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns, you're like, man, I'm going to draft all the Rico Dowdle that I can, right? Yeah. Or something like that. Rico Dowdle could probably have 400 yards and 4 touchdowns running it for the whole other half of the season. For me, dude, I wrestled with this one. And because I was gonna say Drake London because he feels so risky, like we talked about earlier.
How could the other one not be Justin Jefferson?
What?
How could it not be Justin Jefferson?
Because he's at a point in the draft where it's like if I take Justin Jefferson, I'm not taking him until after as of right now. I'm interested in making sure that things don't go completely bust right now. So, I'm not getting much Justin Jefferson in these early simulations because I'm not comfortable taking him till the 107 or the 108.
Hey, but if you knew how he was going to do, you would.
But here's the thing, Trash Man. I'm more concerned about the tier of guys once we get kind of mid-second to late second round. I'm worried about the wide receivers, and I'm trying to justify them vis-a-vis running backs like the Devon Achans, like the Derrick Henrys, like these kinds of guys. And remember, for people who are drafting right now in best ball and an underdog, you're looking at me like I have a third eyeball. But this is how things are going in redraft. And y'all are going to have to – we're just having to adjust to it quickly because the Ultimate Draft cheat sheets are our flagship product and by far what most people come to our website for. So we're having to get ahead of this now. And there's this tier, right, where Garrett Wilson goes. We already talked about the worries with him. Where Chris Olave goes, we've already talked about kind of the statistical profile of him. It's like it's been good, and we love Olave, and I'm going to take him still, right? I'm going to bet on talent with Chris Olave, but there's things to worry about. There's things to worry about with Drake London. We're probably kind of bullish on Mike Evans to even have him up in this tier, right? But what about right in the middle of it? I want to know what Devontae Adams does this year. I want to know how many receptions he has. I want to know whether he's just still a target hog, whether he's still just the dependable, just every single week. Front line, G.
But that's the same. That's the same question we were asking when he went to the Raiders, though. Because
then I'm going to get. What is the same question? What?
We were asking when he went to the Raiders if he was going to continue to be.
Dude, it's different.
If he's going to continue to be the kind of player that he was, and it was answered immediately.
But he was reuniting with his, with his old quarterback and stuff like that. One of his best friends. He wanted to be there.
It's a car, though. It's
right. And it's Carr for Olave, and now it's worse than Carr. It's clearly worse than Carr now.
I just think Adams has proven himself time and time again. I
want to know because, dude, if he's doing something wherever, you could flip the cards over right now, and that Devontae Adams goes for 110 catches and 1,300 yards or something like that. You're going to say like, all right, dude, well, I'm smashing Devontae Adams here at the end of the second round, and it's going to be a super simple thing to do. And I also know that Raiders offense at that point, that they're at least going to be doing some sustainable things to get the ball up and down the field, which of course is also good for everybody's favorite, our man Zeus, Zamir White.